What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show. But this is not a Dr. Vibe thing tonight. It's a men and masculinity thing tonight. And we're continuing our epic conversations called M&M Explores. And we have another new friend. Well, he's not a new friend to the M&M Explorers. He actually spoke at their first summit, the Men and Masculinity first summit. But I have never met him till a little while ago. And now we're going to get to know him better tonight. Gentleman's name is Owen Williams, and if you're asking about the mustache, he's been curling that for 20 plus years. He told me ahead of time, so that question's been answered. So let me share a little bit about Owen with you folks watching live, either via Get Vocal or via Facebook. For the past 30 years, Owen has been actively involved in men's groups and has facilitated them for over 20. He has been featured as a regular contributor on CBC Radio, which is in Canada, folks. We're both based in Canada. Owen's on the West Coast, and I'm in Toronto, and television, and has co-hosted his own radio show called Guy Talk on CFRB Radio. And I listened to some episodes of that, by the way. He sees himself in the role of providing context for the wake-up calls that inevitably come our way. One of his well-known quotes is, quote, "When nothing changes, it only gets worse," unquote. When we embrace the thing we fear, it dissolves. Much of life isn't about solving problems. It's about outgrowing them, becoming larger, more well-rounded human beings. Currently, he's in the final third of his life and immersing himself in writing and the arts. He lives on a remote island off the British Columbia coast, as I said, west coast of Canada, and his partner and is active in community life. Owen is the author of The Relationship Revolution, a breakthrough book about setting the tone and taking responsibility for the quality of relationship you really want. He is the host of the Relationship Minute podcast, which provides inspiration and education for improving relationships. He's in the process of completing his latest book called How to Have an Easy Life, which explores difficult topics that, when faced and embraced, afford us ease and fulfillment in day-to-day life. Welcome to the Men and Masculinity M&M Explorers platform, Mr. Owen Williams. How are you, sir?
I'm great, Dr. Vibe. Glad to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you here, and I just want to shout out Lee Rosen, Tony, Deborah Rosen, and Michelle Barenza, who are here live. And folks, what we're going to do is we're going to spend a few minutes getting to know Owen a little bit better, some of his journey. So you can certainly, as always, type comments in the Get Vocal room and also the Facebook Live room. And then in about 15 minutes, we'll open up the Get Vocal if people want to get on and ask some stuff or comment visually. So Owen, let's get a little background about yourself. Where were you born, growing up, etc.?
Okay. I'm the youngest of 5 kids, the only son. I was born on a farm in Wales. My parents were kind of hippies. They moved back to the land to raise kids, and we didn't have hydro till I was 9.
Whoa, okay.
So I'm used to roughing it, and although I don't do that anymore, but it was an interesting journey because when you grow up on the land, you have a different relationship to nature, and that was a fundamental thing that shaped me as a kid.
Nice. And what was life growing up? One of 5 kids, parents. Mm-hmm. What sort of influences did your parents have on you at a younger age?
Well, they were really ecologically minded. So I recall my mom saying, we have to take care of our own garbage. On a farm, there's no garbage pickup. So they were really concerned about how much packaging was changing in the 60s when I was a young boy, and what to do about things like that. So they were environmentalists, they were eco warriors in many ways, and emphatic about growing good food, eating good food, and being very careful about how we treat ourselves.
Okay. So how did you get, let me ask, Wales, where was your next stop? Because obviously you're not in Wales now. Right. So what was the next stop after Wales?
How did that happen? Well, I escaped the farm and went to college to become a chef. Loved cooking. It was my dream. I succeeded in chef school. I taught in I came to Canada when I was 20. And
Okay.
I guess the point of that is I just wanted to be a chef, but nobody would hire me because I didn't have a Canadian experience. So people were like, well, we can't really hire you, even though I had all these degrees and lots of experience in Europe. But it was a time, as it is sometimes for immigrants today, where it's really hard to break in to a market that you're well versed in, because there's expectations and standards that might be different. So I never actually cooked professionally when I moved here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Why did you choose Canada?
Well, I got married at 20, and my wife's family lived in just outside Toronto, and it seemed like the best place to go to. So we moved there, and I spent 39 years in Toronto before I moved out here.
Do you miss Toronto at all?
I miss the restaurants. I miss some good friends. We have 2 restaurants on our island.
Nice.
It's only 2.
That's all right.
It's fine.
Two's better than none.
That's true. And in the summer, there's a couple more. But it's a very different way of life. And so I miss some really good friends and some parts of the city, and being able to go to plays and different things in the arts, bands and stuff. But we get down to Victoria, Vancouver every 6-8 weeks, and we get our little fix of the city life, and then come back and just swim in our beautiful home here.
Nice. When did relationships or studying relationships enter your journey?
Yeah, well, by the time I was 27, I felt like I had it all. And, I had a beautiful wife, I had a great career, I had money, I had property, and I was miserable on the inside. Mm. And it was really difficult for me, because it's like, how can I have all the things that you're supposed to have, yet be unhappy? And, I was unhappy with myself, not with the things that I was creating. And it drove me eventually. And it was there that I realized that I'd been avoiding certain things in my life. I'd been running away from certain things, including my family. As much as it was idyllic to grow up where I did, there was also parts of my family life that were very painful. My dad became a drinker around the time that I hit puberty, 9, 10, 11. And that escalated. It was problematic. And so I hadn't dealt with any of that stuff from my past. And I was experiencing it coming up in my own relationship. And I had vowed, as a teenager, never to be like my parents. Well, guess what? 7 years in, I realized I have exactly the same relationship as they had.
Oh, wow.
And in its worst way. And I was really miserable.
Wow. So you noticed that things weren't going good. What did you do to start changing or start making a turn?
Well, as I say, I went into therapy, and it's interesting because in Toronto there's therapy under OHIP, our medical insurance plan, and I went for 2 years, and really nothing changed. And a good friend said to me, "Well, it's not changing because it's not costing you anything. If you put some skin in the game, maybe you'd be more motivated to look at yourself in a different way." And I'm like, well, I don't want to pay. Like, why should I have to pay for this? So, of course, I took the advice. I stepped into a different kind of process, but a therapeutic process. And I changed more in the first year than I had in the previous 3. So it was life-changing to all of a sudden take responsibility for the kind of changes that I wanted to see in my life. And I kind of got hooked on the process. It was so relieving and engaging. And it was the therapist that I was seeing. It was a couple, a husband and wife. They encouraged me to take a training program, and I had the time to do it and the money to do it. I was teaching at the time as a professor in the community college system in Toronto. So my teaching workload wasn't that great. And so I entered a training program, never thinking that I would become a counselor or a therapist. And it unfolded from there.
Nice. So how long, like, do you remember the first early days of the counseling coaching journey? How did those start?
Well, that's a great question, because I used to walk my dog. I've always had a dog. I used to walk my dog in a park, and you know dog people not by their names but by their dogs' names, and you'll talk about your work and whatever. But I never knew this woman's name. But we talked about what our work was, and I was telling her that I was in this training program, blah blah blah. And one day she came to me and she said, I'm in charge of programming in the North York School Board, and I've got a course that is scheduled, and the teacher of the course isn't available. Would you take it on? And I'm like, what's the course? And she said, well, it's conflict resolution. And I was thinking, oh God, that sounds really dry and boring. So she said, well, anything to do with relationships you can do, so long as it's in the 10-week period. So I stepped into it, as I tend to do when opportunities come in front of me. I've learned to say yes to life, because things lead to things. And so I taught the course, and two of the women in the course came to me at the end of the course and said, well, I got more out of this course than I have out of visiting with my therapist. Would you take me on to work with personally? And I'm like, really? Because I had not expected this. Right. And so I tentatively said yes. And then they wanted to pay me. It's like, whoa, you want to pay me for this? It just seemed easy and natural. And that's really, in a nutshell, how my practice started.
Excellent. Well, let's get to the main conversation topic this evening, and I think it's a very interesting one. And I'm going to open up the room now if people have any questions. You wanted to chat about, to be a great dad, you need to be a great husband. And it's actually funny. I just started to do facilitate a parenting class, and I showed them a video, and unannounced, I did not realize this line came up in the video.
Oh,
so
wow.
As I said, wow, I said, I've never heard, outside of you, I had never heard it before. And it was a young father with his first child. And he said, that they say in order to be a great dad, you need to be a great husband. I said, I wonder if Owen and this gentleman know. No, I didn't. I didn't know. So why did you come up with this conversation piece tonight?
Well, I've been in private practice for over 30 years, and I've worked with a lot of couples who, no couple comes to me if things are going great. So they're usually in crisis and facing some difficulty. And many are at the stage of splitting up, or they've already split up. And, I hear a lot of women saying, God, I can't stand being with him. Our marriage is terrible, but he's a great dad. And I'm like, well, how can he be a great dad if you have lost respect for him? If you don't like him or want to be with him any longer? And, it opened up lots of conversations in my individual and couples counseling about, the role of parenting in raising kids. I mean, there's lots of single parents, and kudos to them. I mean, I think two parents raising kids is hard enough. A single parent, whether it's a man or a woman, raising kids, I mean, that is such a task. So I just look at it from the perspective of, what do kids really need from their parents? And I think kids need parents to love each other.
Okay. Now, and so, and you and I had a brief conversation about this, because I know that you're saying you need to be a great husband. Mm-hmm. So we're going to go at it right at the front end here. What about single fathers who are not married?
Okay. You mean who are not with the mother of their children?
Yes.
Okay. Great question. And I think the essence of that is, how does he talk about the child's mother? How does he relate to the child's mother? What's the interaction like? You know, I said earlier, I ended up having the same kind of relationship as my parents modeled for me. And it wasn't the part that I liked. I mean, it wasn't all bad, their relationship, by any means. But the pieces that didn't work, I had adopted those. So when a dad, and believe me, I work with lots of individuals whose parents split up, and some whose parents still don't talk to one another after 25 years. And the kids, as adults, are still struggling with their relationship with their parents and the acrimony between them. So, you know, I think that kids lose out when parents, whether they're together or not, can't transform their relationship to one of liking, trusting, and respecting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was speaking to a gentleman who's a family lawyer who's become an associate, well, a friend, a supporter of dads. And when we first met, within the first 10 minutes, he said, all dads want is to be treated with respect and fairness.
Yep.
And it just stuck in my head, that quote. So when you were doing your relationship counseling and you were doing it with men,
mm-hmm.
do you get to the point to find out what was their relationship with their father?
It's a primary part of my work. Because, I worked with a young man a while ago who doesn't talk to his own dad. And he thinks he's going to be just fine as a dad. And I'm like, well, you know, your kids are going to watch that. Yes. They're going to see that you're there for them and you love them and you play ball with them and you do whatever you do with them. But there's always going to be this lingering wondering about, but why don't you have a good relationship with your dad? What went on there? Look, we disappoint each other. Parents disappoint children. Children disappoint parents. But one of the things that I find that we struggle with as human beings is we don't deal with disappointment well. We get positional. We get stuck in a perspective. You know, they're wrong. And what I'm proposing here is that the damage that causes goes on for generations.
Yeah, I agree. So what, and I guess it's a generalization, when you're doing your coaching of men, do you see a familiar pattern of how they were raised by their father and how it trends into their fathering their children or child?
Well, I see a pattern of either becoming exactly like them or being the exact opposite. And there's a saying in the 12-step program, 180 degrees from sick is still sick.
Mm.
So I guess my point here, Dr. Vibe, is that if we can't let go of the disappointment that we might have with our dads, and believe me, I didn't talk to my dad for 6 years.
Wow.
I left home a pretty angry young man. You know, he disappointed me. I did not know how to deal with it. He didn't know how to deal with it. We were both waiting for the other to take the first step. And interestingly, it's like when I went into therapy, the big problem for me was my relationship with my dad. And that's what I had to come to terms with.
Mm. How often do the dads you deal with when it comes to parenting realize that, or is it something that you have to unfold for them?
I most of the time I have to unfold it for them, because I think in our culture we've accepted a very bland possibility of father-son relationships.
Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I think, you know, if you look at, and I don't watch television, I haven't watched television really for close to 30 years, but if you look at a sitcom, which the vast majority of them are written by men. Men in sitcoms are usually bumbling idiots. They can't get it right. They can't even vacuum correctly. Men in commercials are represented as less than. And so we have this kind of expectation in our culture that men, that it's okay not to have a great relationship with your dad. It's kind of like he's there.
Right.
His usefulness, has preceded him. So young men kind of write their dads off.
Wow. And so when you're dealing with, and I'm sure you deal with dads from all different ages.
Yep.
Do you see any differences in their parenting styles?
Yeah, I think dads are way more involved today.
That's good to hear.
Some more than others, absolutely. They're really engaged. But what I also see, and this applies to women as much as it does, to mothers as much as it does to dads, is everybody wants to be the perfect dad or the perfect mother. And the pressure that they put on themselves is enormous, to make the grade, to meet the standard, which isn't written down anywhere. I mean, people
Right.
make this crap up. But what ends up happening is the relationship between them suffers as husband and wife. And then when that has withered away, what's left is the relationship with the kids, which often becomes, the kids' relationship with the adults feed them, and it becomes a burden on kids because they look at their parents and they think, geez, being an adult isn't a lot of fun. If their parents don't like each other, don't respect each other, don't trust each other, they're sniping at each other because they're under so much stress, they're, there's bills to pay, they have debt, they don't spend any time together. Well, this all has impact on children.
This is good stuff. So we have a number of people in the room that have joined recently. I think I shouted Leland already. Also, also the Hello Room, Deanna. Thank you so much for stopping by. We have 2 spots open, so if anyone would like to come in and join the conversation, that's fine. Also, the comments are available on the side. So how has, in your opinion, the 2-part question, the role of a father and society's perceived role of a father changed in your journey?
Well, the role of the father has changed in so much as more young men are stepping in and what I would say co-parenting. But I think for some of those men, the real challenge is that in society, they don't have a group of men that they can actually connect with to talk about the challenges that they face in being young fathers or young husbands. In the past, there were sort of men's clubs, and men would gather, men would do sports, men would gather in these clubs. And at some level, there was a camaraderie that men shared. But I think part of the challenge is that very few men get to connect with other men. So, in a counseling perspective, I think one of the worst things a man can do if he needs help in his relationship is go talk to a female therapist. But most men think that that's the best thing to do because I want to understand what she wants, so what she's thinking. But a woman's going to tell you what they want. I think a male therapist is going to tell you, what do you want to do differently? Like what is your authentic expression in terms of how you need to show up, and to encourage a man to talk about that.
Excellent. Well, we have a friend who has jumped into the room, and I'm very happy. Sal, thank you very much for stopping in. You're on mute right now, so you're going to need to unmute yourself. So go ahead, and thanks for stopping by. What would you like to share?
I'm a single father who is on a men's team. I'm living in a city where I do not have a men's team, but I have a bridged men's team through a variety of groups, Zoom, Meetup, whatever you might want to call it. It's
awesome.
imperative for us fathers to stay on the course of being on point for our children. I have a 12-year-old son who I've fathered, I'm responsible for, and I lost custody and so forth. And I traveled from Toronto to Halifax. I left my world to be a father, to own responsibilities. I left my world, my job, my career, my men's team, you name it. Moved to a place where I didn't know where I was going to work, where I was going to live. All I knew was where my son lives. And for 3 years to gain access, 16 calls to the police with a court order. And finally, my son is not going to school. And guess what happens? My son is dropped off on my doorstep. He's 12 years old.
Wow.
I'm 5'10". He wears size 13 shoes. And his mom, he can't make it to school because his mom and his aunt can't make him. Comes to my house and we have rules. And I love him. I tell him I've got his back. I got him covered. I speak a different language than his mother does. And I tell his mom, you know what? I love you for loving our son in a manner that I cannot.
Beautiful.
In a manner that I cannot convey. Now is the time that you share his next path over to perhaps what his father may be able to do. So anyways, he's here with me for a month, and I love it. I'm scared, but it's my responsibility.
I think that's really wonderful stuff. And if you want, I'm going to type my email address in the comment section. I'd love to stay in touch with you because my daytime gig is I actually am a program coordinator for the only father-focused family center in all of Canada.
I'm in there with you, brother. I'm in there with you.
So I typed in my email address. Owen, what would you like to share with Sa after that was good stuff.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you see the value in being present for your son at this critical time in his life. I always say a woman can a boy, but she can't teach. And that's not about being disrespectful to women. It's about honoring that there's a time in a boy's life that men need to rally for him. And, you know, the fact that you took the leap, just that tells your son something so powerful about what's possible. So good for you. And, you know, it's going to be a bumpy road. You already know that. It's been bumpy. But,
yes,
you know, yeah, so for me to hear you say, I love you, you know, the boy's mother, I love you for the way that you can love our son. That's
huge.
That's huge. Instead of hanging on to resentment about, you know, how you got there, you're there. The truth, my truth is that, you know, couples fall apart because our shadow stuff from our past comes into the relationship, and most couples have no way of dealing with that because some of it's unconscious to us. We don't even know what's going on for ourselves. But when men can be in a men's team, whether it's by Zoom or in person or any other way that you fabricate that for yourself, you'll gain insight into how you want to show up for this young man. I love it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Sa, what is your vision for your son?
I want him to have a better life than me, as most fathers do for their children. I want them to learn the qualities of what it feels like to be a good man. I want him to learn about his strengths his weaknesses, recognize what those weaknesses are, maybe the shadow sides as well, and know where his power is coming from. He decides, he chooses. And we talk about the warrior, the king, and the magician, and the lover. Presently, right now, he's 12. A lot of times he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's over his head a little bit. But,
okay.
In our house, we talk about, I am the king. He is the prince.
Mm.
And I talk about ownership of responsibilities, respect for oneself, respect for one's home, respect for one's word, dignity, the intangibles. We talk about the intangibles, and we talk about honor, and we talk about commitment. For what I want for my son is to grow up to be a leader. I don't want him to be a follower. I know he'll have his challenges in his life, as I've had, and as a lot of us do. And I want him to grow into himself, of what he wants to be for himself.
Beautiful.
If he wants to follow, great. I'm okay with that.
Wonderful. Right. Anything you want to add on?
Yeah, I think so. You've found yourself in Halifax. Start a gathering of men. Get a group of men together. It's amazing how when you put it out there, there's a hunger in men to discover more parts of themselves. And you're being a leader in your son's life, and you've got a lot to offer.
Thank you.
I agree. Yeah. That's fantastic. Tony, joining in, and I also want to shout out Stephen. And again, I'm glad to have all the men come on in. Sal, you can certainly stay on if you'd like, or click out whatever is most comfortable. Anyone who else wants to jump in, just message me on the side. Tony?
Hey again, Owen. How are you?
Hey, good, thanks, Tony.
Well, as I was mentioning in the pre-show, I myself am not a father. I am an uncle. I am an uncle of a 12-year-old boy and an 18-year-old boy. My brother is a single father. As a child, my brother and I was raised by my mother, his single mother, along with her sister. But she made sure that we had a lot of men in our lives, like the children's minister of our church, or the youth minister of our church, or a good friend of our family who rented a room back our house. He became my father figure. Yep. It just had a lot of. Even my brother was, a man, figure in my life. And it turned out that history repeated itself for some reason. And now
it always does.
And now, we're back in the same situation again, but with a little different circumstances of I'm the uncle, and sometimes I have to not take the place of, but act as a father to my nephews, because my father, because my brother is always working, or just not around, or just so I become the cool uncle.
Yeah, and don't underestimate, Tony, the value of an uncle, because there are things that boys can share with other men that aren't their dad. It's actually easier to share some things because there's a safety in that relationship, and sometimes way less vulnerability, because uncles can have more tolerance or more range. And so it's a very important role that you step into, and not just in terms of supporting your brother, but in supporting your nephews.
Yeah.
I want to jump in here, because I'm sure there are many men that you have coached, past, present, and future, that were raised by their mother. How does that affect them as a father?
Well, there's always two sides to every coin. Sometimes, if there isn't a lot of male influence in their lives, my experience is they often become soft men. And what I mean by a soft man is a man who is acquiescing to the needs of the feminine. Because if you're just raised by a single mother, she holds all the cards in terms of love and acceptance and blessing. And as children, we always want to be blessed. We want to be blessed by the feminine. We want to be blessed by the masculine. So if a boy is only blessed by the mother, there's a lot at risk of losing in terms of fully inhabiting their own identity as a man. And in fact, there's a lot of questions. What does it mean to be a man? Because my dad was absent at some points through alcohol and different things. And my version of my dad was skewed by my mother's view of him and her upset with him for not showing up a particular way. So, that's one possibility. The other is the boy who has a father hunger, who goes out and, whether it's hockey or baseball, and connects with a coach who takes on a fathering role, or an uncle, or a friend of the family, perhaps somebody through a church, and actually goes and meets that need. And those young men have a different quality to them, and often can take more risks with the feminine.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Tony, you want to add anything?
Well, I did want to ask, as far as a father or an uncle who has physical problems, or mental problems, or whatever, is there a difference between the relationship of a child who has a father or an uncle or a grandparent that is just not, does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
There's a possibility for more acceptance, more range of acceptance. We're all different. We all have limitations. We all have a variety of aspects to who we are. So, we all bring something valuable to the table. I think that's what's important.
Yeah. Because I do have a lot of health problems in my life, but my nephews understand that, and the rest of my family understands that. But their friends, though, they're kind of like, a little taken back by that, and kind of like, well, they don't quite understand it and
get it.
Yeah.
But this is an opportunity for your nephews now to take a stand with their friends and educate their friends about, differences and inclusion. One of the lovely things that Sal said was, he said, I told my son, I have your back. And that's what boys need. So long as you can communicate that to your nephews, that you have their back, there'll be a stand for you too.
Yeah. I want to cycle back a bit to earlier on in regards to because to be a great dad, you need to be a great husband. And I'm sure that in your coaching journey, you're dealing more and more with single fathers.
Yes. Yeah.
And so has your approach to this subject when it comes to single dads changed with the influx of single dads who are not husbands or don't have partners?
Well, the gift in being a therapist, counselor, coach is that I'm always learning from my clients. Right. They bring the insight to me, because what shows up in the process is really what's missing or what's needed. And, I think the big thing that's missing for men is camaraderie with other men. So when single fathers come to me and they don't have the support, it's often about building support. So I'm a huge believer in men's groups, that men need to, and the way that group looks can look multifaceted. but that we need to actually connect in and hang in with other men. Oh, look who's here.
All right. The new star of the show has appeared.
Hey, Sal, who's this?
This is my lovely, handsome prince, king in training. His name is Kai. Hi. My son.
Hi, Kai.
Hey,
Kai,
how
you're as old as my youngest nephew, and you look about that way. Yes.
So, Kai, I'm going to put you on the spot, and I know Daddy's got your back. What do you love about your dad?
He's nice and caring.
That's all you need. That's all that needs to be said.
Yeah.
That's all that needs to be said. Where would your life be if your dad wasn't in your life?
It would be worse.
It'd be worse, yeah.
It's a great testimony. I'm not going to ask you any more questions because I know you've been put on the spot. But no, very good. So that's what an M&M Explorers conversation is about, and especially the legacy building.
When I ran men's groups, I strongly encouraged men to bring not only their fathers, but their sons. Because we as men and boys, we can only learn from other men and boys, right? We need to learn from each other. No one person has the answer. So, Kai, I hope that you learn from your father, that the relationship that the two of you have will stand the test of time and is one of the most important relationships you can ever have.
That's beautiful. So, Kai, let me ask, I got another question came up because Owen just likes dropping knowledge bombs here. Tell me one thing, Kai, that your dad has taught you that you will keep forever. Doesn't have to be anything big. Could it be even a small thing?
Whatever you need, man. Say whatever you need.
Okay, you think about it. I'm going to ask Dad the same question. What has one thing your son has taught you that makes you strive to be a great dad?
He's taught me that I am worthy of fatherhood. He's taught me that I'm worthy of my path of being a better man if I choose that path, and if I'm committed to that path, and if I'm willing to pay the price. And the price doesn't have to be so hard, actually. The price can be very easy, and it can be very, very good because I don't need to reinvent the wheel. And I have my men around me, and if I watch and follow the process, and I am vulnerable and authentic and loving and caring, and I'm really determined to be a better man and human being, then this process will be a lot easier for me. I'm very stubborn to some degree, I'll be honest with you.
Many men are, so don't feel alone.
So Kai has taught me it's a worthy journey.
Beautiful.
And I'm worthy. And I'm worthy.
The flip side of stubborn is determined. So I actually hear a determination that you have by relinquishing your job, your familiarity to actually plant yourself beside your son. My hope for you, Kai, is that you, Sal, is that you share with Kai stories of your own father.
Yeah.
So this is multi-generational. And, my dad didn't get along with his dad, so he didn't share anything about his dad. And that was a big hole in my life. It's like I had this hankering to know more about my lineage.
I plan to. My father's passing is coming up on Thursday coming up, and I have a ceremony planned. And this will be the first time that I'm with my son together, he and I, that will be on the anniversary of my father's passing. So, yes,
okay.
I plan on.
Wow.
Absolutely.
That will be, and I think for both of you, I speak that you'll never forget that moment, and you keep that moment forever and ever.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's a really, really huge moment, and that's really big. And actually, so I'm going to ask you. We're looking at this subject: great dad, great husband. What good or bad did your dad exhibit that affected you being a husband for the time that you were?
My dad was very quiet. He went to work. He worked like 6-7 days a week. He didn't really convey himself openly with dialogue. When I used to ask him about the emotional stuff, he'd be like, "What do you want from me? You have over your head. You have food on the plate. You have medicine. You have school. What else do you want from me?" And I recall in my relationship with my son's mother that when my parents were ill and I'm the only care provider, she asked me, she's like, "You're leaving us?" And I said, "No, I'm not. I have to take care of 2 elderly people who are unable to take care of themselves. And what else do you want from me?" I remember the words coming out of my mouth, "What else do you want from me?" And I remember those words coming out of my father's mouth of, "I'm giving you everything that I've got. What else do you want from me?" So I consider it a positive, but at the same time, you know what? I could have dealt with it better. I definitely
hindsight's 2020. Come on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and from that point, you know, when the relationship kind of dissolved, I told myself I was not going to walk away from my responsibilities to my boy and my responsibilities as a husband. You know, whether she and I are together or not, he's my responsibility, and you know, she takes good care of him, so I need to take care of him as well too on her behalf.
Beautiful.
So I love her for caring for him.
Wow. Owen, do you want to add to that? This is fabulous.
Well, I mean, the only thing I can say is that at this juncture, you know, hitting puberty, being 10, 11, 12, this is where, you know, you're not a boy, you're not a man. You're in this in-between and betwixt stage, and your dad's guidance is critical here. He gets to teach you how to be respectful to women, how to be respectful to yourself. There's so much richness that's possible here. And this is actually being a good husband, even though you aren't together with his mother, right? It's like this is being husbandry is actually the art of husbandry meant to hold things together. It was an embrace. And so you can still have that embrace in a different way.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thanks for showing up, young man.
Yeah, big time.
Give him a thumbs up.
Keep it going. Keep it up, and watch Dad's back. He loves you lots.
Thanks,
Nice.
gentlemen.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for making the conversation better.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Bye-bye. That is good stuff, Owen.
Okay.
That is really good stuff. We're starting to wind down the conversation a bit. Were there any other things that you wanted to make sure we included in our conversation this evening?
Well, I think the key thing that I want to reiterate is that whether, let me say this. Women lose respect for men in a relationship because they're not their word, because they don't do what they say they're going to do. And so a woman falls in love with a man's greatness. And sometimes before he can even see it, you know, she has belief in him. She has, you know, which will turn into an expectation that can feel like pressure. But when a man says he's going to do something and he doesn't, and she has to turn into a nag to try to get him to do it, eventually she'll stop challenging him. But it is the role of other men to challenge men. It's not a woman's role to challenge us to be the best that we can be. We need men to do that. And I find that relationships go south when women have lost respect for their man, because he doesn't appreciate being challenged.
There comes that word respect
Yeah.
again.
But you see, I think it's self-respect. And it's not a sexy thing to be a man these days. It's like I think we've got to rescue ourselves from this socialized image. There's these terms, toxic masculinity. I really don't like that term, because we don't even know what masculinity is half the time. We've actually got to have an inquiry in what does it mean to be a man. Any man that I've ever worked with, the first question I ask is, when did you first consider yourself to be a man? And when I looked at that question for myself, I was 16, I'd left home, I got myself a full-time job, and in 2 weeks, when I got my first paycheck, I remember thinking, I'm a man now. See, I had it linked to earning a paycheck. That's meant I was a man. It took me another 16 years, maybe a bit longer, before I realized what it actually meant to be a man. To have a code of conduct, to be my word, to have personal honor in how I wanted to show up and experience other people. One of the greatest measures of a man is how he behaves when he doesn't get his way.
Ah.
Now, we could do a whole hour on that topic.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So so give some advice to the man on how to behave when he doesn't get his way.
Well, it's really about, we get to be reactive or proactive as men. A reactive man does not have a vision for who he is and where he's headed. He can be taken by a shiny object that just passes in front of him. Whereas a proactive man has a vision. He has some clarity about how he wants to behave, how he wants to function, how he wants to be of service to his family, to his friends. And so it's really about knowing yourself, because when we behave badly, and we all have the capacity to behave badly, it speaks volumes about what we don't know about ourselves. But, I come across men who say, well, she deserved that, or it's not my fault. Like, I behaved badly, but there was a good reason for it. There's never a good reason to behave badly.
Okay. Excellent. So as we close down our conversation tonight, any parting words you'd like to leave for our audience?
Yeah, find out what you...
Especially our dads and our husbands.
Okay. I think, if I come back to the title, you can't be a great dad unless you're a great husband. It is about honoring the relationship with the mother of your children, whether you're together or not. You can love, honor, and cherish somebody without being together. Because at the end of the day, it's what we all want. And in relationship, we've got to give. If we want it, we've got to give it. It always penetrates.
Nice. Excellent. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
My website is relationshipexcellence.com.
I'm going to type that out right now.
And my podcast on iTunes and Spotify and all those other sites is The Relationship Minute.
And how long has that podcast been going for?
I release one every 2 days. They're 1 minute podcasts about relationship tips. It's been going only for 4 months, but yeah.
Good. You're a veteran. You're a veteran now. Well, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the Men and Masculinity core team, for taking time out of your positive, productive schedule to share with us tonight. Really enjoyed the conversation, even more when men like Sal come on with his young man. That really is what it's all about the legacy building, a positive legacy build. I'm Dr. Vibe. I'm the host of these epic conversations, M&M Explores. A few last things before we shut it down. I'm going to give the website for Men and Masculinity that's in the comments section. So if you want to go there, you will have a lot of rich information. And also upcoming conversations on M&M Explores. We have on April 11th, Robert Leung, and he's going to be chatting with a gentleman who he's mentored for a number of years. And the title of the conversation is Men, Why Wait Till You Die to Hear Your Eulogy? So each of these men will be eulogizing each other.
Beautiful.
And then on April 18th, we have Tom Mack talking about Men, Do You Have a Code? So great upcoming conversations. If you go to the website, you'll be able to ask questions. If you have any topics that you'd like to have discussed or individuals that you feel would be great for this platform, please send us that information. Go to the website. I'd like to thank Lee, the Hello Room, Deanna, Bobby, Deb, Tony, Sa, and his son. There's some other people that came on. Oh, Stephen. Also, if I forgot you, it's because of my head, not my heart. And thank you so much. And please subscribe to the channel. We'd like to have you as a regular visitor and a regular contributor. Be well and good night. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Be well.